are scattered in Iraq, Afghanistan, former Yugoslavia, and elsewhere. The ever-present danger of nuclear power plants causing widespread and irreparable damage was made clear with the Fukushima accident in 2011. Michiko is a living reminder to oppose nuclear madness. As hibakusha, a survivor of the 1945 blast, we are honored to have her share her story with us once again. Please join me in welcoming Michiko Kornhauser.
Thank you very much for having me here. I wish nothing but peace in the world for our children and grandchildren and so on. So whenever I have a chance, I go to schools and colleges and give a talk, wishing these children will grow up and see the peace in the world. My talk will be finished with singing so that our singers will be standing behind me pretty soon. This is about World War II through the eyes of a Japanese girl. In the fall of 1941, my family and I came back from Taiwan, where my father, as a Japanese Imperial Navy officer, was to establish a Navy base in southern Taiwan called Takao. After our return, we began to live in the city of Kamakura, located in the south of Tokyo. One day, when I was playing with my toys, I suddenly heard my father shout, "Oh no, the emperor is wrong to start a war against America. We simply do not have enough natural resources to fight against America." My mother was frantically trying to calm my father down. She was afraid that our neighbors would report my father to the military police and will have my father arrested and thrown into jail. My father shook his head and mumbled, "We will not win this war." It was the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor on December the 7th, 1941. The Japanese Navy supply system in Japan became divided into two as the war started, East and West, and my father became the head of the Western Division, and its headquarters was situated in Okayama City, about 100 miles east of Hiroshima, where I grew up until I came to the East-West Center in Honolulu, Hawaii in 1961, thanks to President Kennedy. Then one day, my father was sent to New Guinea to oversee the smooth distribution of the Navy supplies in the entire Pacific. As the days and months went by, we began to hear more and more pessimistic news on how the war was turning into. Then one day, we heard from the Japanese government that my father was missing in action in New Guinea and presumed killed. It was May the 3rd, 1944. I couldn't believe the news that I would never see my father again. The next day, when I came home from school, my mother was crying and told me that one Navy officer came into my father's office and knelt down in front of the door and shot himself to death. He had a piece of paper in his hand which said that without Captain Usui, Japan was no longer worthwhile a place to live. Everybody felt sad and moved around quietly. The war situation was getting worse for Japan, and one night, many B-29 bombers flew over Okayama City, where I was living, and dropped the firebombs, destroying much of the eastern part of the city. That night, I lost more than 20% of my classmates. Soon, the school teachers gathered us children and took us to the countryside to be safe. We began to live in a large temple together. One day on August the 8th, when we were playing outside, we suddenly noticed the sky was getting dark. And soon we became covered with dark and gray ash. The teachers listened to the radio and told us that America had dropped a huge bomb over Hiroshima, which started a huge fire. As the wind was blowing our way, we got the ash. After all, we were only 100 miles away from Hiroshima. The teachers urged us, please run to Yoshi River and wash yourselves. As we rushed to the river nearby, we noticed that the river was covered with the same ash too. But we did our best to clean ourselves as the teachers urged us. Now we know everything was radioactive, but that day we didn't know anything about it. Soon after that, on August the 15th, we heard the emperor announce that the war was over and we were allowed to go home. As I arrived home, I saw my neighbor's son in the living room. My mother told me that both his parents were visiting their relatives in Hiroshima when the atomic bomb was dropped, and there was no communication from them ever since. So their only son went to Hiroshima to look for his parents and found that the house they were visiting was destroyed and both parents were killed. After he buried his parents in the gravesite, he came home. Now that he was all by himself, my mother asked him to come and live with us. When September came, our school started. This boy, however, had no energy to get up from his bed. One day, when I came home from school, my mother told me that the boy was diagnosed to have radiation sickness from having been to Hiroshima so soon after the bomb was dropped. Sometime after that fall of 1945, that boy died, joined the parents. Throughout my life, I always wondered about ourselves who were covered with the ash, black ash from Hiroshima that day. So I began to live one day at a time. Thank you very much for listening to me. But here, I'd like to tell you what happened. That is, when the atomic bomb was dropped on August the 6th, the Hiroshima instantly killed 80,000 people. However, 70,000 to 135,000 more suffered for years with a lingering radiation sickness. In the case of Nagasaki, the atomic bomb called Fat Man was dropped 3 days later and killed 40,000 people at once. But 60,000 to 80,000 people suffered for years with a lingering radiation sickness. It's today, 2024, 79 years later, have we learned anything from the past? We want nothing but peace in the world so we can live together happily ever after. Now we are going to have singers singing, hoping that we will have peace in the world. Thank you very much.